Welcome into Juckonbucks. Appreciate y'all so much. So this morning we did a special Friday edition. Normally what we do is Juck and Chris live on Friday, where me and Chris Drew from Menace to Sports go through all the games that we're looking forward to seeing on Saturday. And then we go through the Buckeyes game in a little more detail. Bucks got a big one this week. Well, this week we welcomed on our buddies from the Buckeye Roast, Q and Ron, and then Pat joined Chris. And we had a fun talk. It was a fun mashup, but I didn't get to get through all my notes. And I've got more to say about the Buckeyes game because we always come and do the post-game show here immediately after the game. And what I like to have for the post-game show is kind of a list of things that I'm looking for out of the game so we can go back and see, okay, here's what we were looking for. How did it align with what we saw? So I like to do that. I also like to go through my favorite games from the weekend coming up and go through the time slots and what I'm going to be watching in each time slot. So I wanted to get to that. And I know everybody's not a huge fan of the panel discussions. I thought it went really well today. Those things can be really sloppy with 5 people. One of the things that can also happen is you may have a certain direction you want the thing to go, but with so many people talking, it gets way far away from you. And I know some of you guys thought that it took on a little bit of a negative tone, and I felt that as well. Definitely not the mood I wanted to set heading into Iowa, but like I said, those things are hard to control, and sometimes it goes that way. Things are great. Things are fantastic. Bucks got a really big test tomorrow, and I think it's a really big test where we need it most at the perfect time and with very little risk. We've got 2 areas of the team that have maybe been lagging, need to get better: the linebackers and the tight ends. Now, tight ends, I don't know that they'll get much work tomorrow, but specifically the linebackers going against a really big test tomorrow. And what I mean by little risk is if you have to bring in Latham and Caleb down from safety to really help the linebackers in run support, if they're struggling, you're not going to be penalized for it because Iowa cannot make you pay with the pass. So what I think we're going to see is let the linebackers work. Let's see how they do before you bring down run support from the safeties a lot. And I think that's great that they get to have this test. They get to get this work in before we go to teams like Oregon, like Nebraska, even like Penn State, that can run the ball well and make you pay with the pass. So a really big test. Caleb Johnson, Iowa's running back, is technically 3rd in the country, but he's basically tied with the 2nd place kid in yards after contact. Yards after contact and explosive plays. That's this guy's game. And he's really good. Maybe like 5.67 yards after contact, which is phenomenal. 2 yards more than Quinshawn. And we know Quinshawn's really good at that. Quinshawn's got excellent balance when he's going down, but this kid's a load. 220. He might even weigh a little more. Anyway, Iowa, a huge test in the running game, and the linebackers are going to be running 3 linebackers most of the game. Iowa runs a lot of 12 personnel, and in that 12 personnel, Jim Knowles said that he is going to match that essentially every time automatically with the Buckeyes 3 linebacker set. So in the 4-2-5, the base defense, Cody Simon is the Mike linebacker. Sonny Styles is the Will linebacker. When they go to the 4-3, when they bring in 3 linebackers, the 3rd linebacker is Arvell Reese. Arvell Reese only knows how to play Mike. So you have to then rotate Cody Simon off the Mike, and Cody goes to Will. And then Sonny Styles rotates off Will, and he goes to Sam. Now, Sonny rotating off of Will to go to Sam, also in the beginning of the year, he was playing Mike, has made for a lot for Sonny to learn, which is part of the reason that he's not picking things up as fast as maybe a lot of people anticipated. And that's not an excuse, but it is a reason. It's going to take longer when you're doing that many things. And that reason is one of the reasons that he's playing a lot of snaps. They want him to get as much as they can under his belt before we get into this big game stretch. Now, I am a proponent of not automatically going to the 4-3 when they got 2 tight ends in, because you're taking Jordan Hancock off when the 3rd linebacker comes in. But at the same time, that third linebacker is Arvell Reese, and I want him on the field. So I'm good with it. I just think that you might want to try to leave Hancock in there and go with your 4-2-5 because he is so good in run support and he's much better in coverage. And those tight ends, particularly a team like Iowa, can pick you apart. But we're going to see the 4-3 a lot this weekend. And I think that's good to see all three of those linebackers with Tyleek back in. So we often forget that what those guys do up front is it can vary how the linebackers play so much, right? Tyleek is such a stud that not only does he make such a difference for the linebackers, but Ty Hamilton not had very good games the last couple of games. He plays so much better when Tyleek is taking that attention from him. He really shines with Tyleek in there. So Tyleek coming back also elevates Ty Hamilton. And that interior of the Ohio State defensive line goes from pretty good to excellent immediately with Tyleek back in. And that in turn makes the linebackers' job easier. So the fact that they haven't had great games the last two games, they got an advantageous spot against Iowa with Tyleek back in the lineup, wreaking havoc with Ty playing better. So that's going to be a really awesome test to watch. The Ohio State linebackers versus the Iowa rushing game. And to me, that is the number one key to the game and the number one thing we're looking for. How do the linebackers perform against this Iowa rushing attack? And that's the number one thing we're looking for. And further, Jim Knowles talked this week about tackling, knockback tackling. And what he means is limiting those yards after contact, stopping him for a 2-yard gain instead of making contact for a 2-yard gain. And then he ends up getting 4 because you're dragging him down. We've had some linebacker struggles. Cody Simon even missed 2 tackles last week. We want to see how the linebackers are tackling, not just the linebackers, but everybody else. So those are our first two. Number 3, Iowa has 2 really good interior defensive linemen, a couple of loads, and they got an All-American linebacker who's returning. Guy's a savvy vet, tough to block. Will we see the continued offensive line dominance? By the numbers, the Buckeyes offensive line has been excellent. And by the eye test, they've been excellent as well. You got an All-American, I think, center, soon to be, in Seth McLaughlin, a fantastic left guard in Donovan Jackson, and then you got a couple of rookies at right guard rotating in between the two of them, sharing snaps. And that right there is a huge test for the two of them, their biggest test yet. Couple of loads right in front of them, and then trying to get it to the second level and block an excellent linebacker. It's going to be a hell of a test. So the offensive line's biggest test to date, are they going to continue to show their dominance? Are they going to look as good as they've looked previously? Going to be really interesting to see. Number 4, a fast start. Like, this is something we've had issues with for 2 years. We came into this year and I thought, man, there is no way that this team is going to have this issue again. And in 3 of the 4 games we've played, we've seen a relatively sluggish start. Against Western Michigan, it was phenomenal. Just right off the rip, offense and defense took it to them really hard. So that's going to be on the list every week. Can we see a fast start? I think it's so important in these games. And I think Ryan Day does too. And I know that this has frustrated him a ton. Number 5, how is Chip going to attack? How is Chip going to attack the defense? I was really surprised last week against Michigan State when I figured we'd come out running the ball quite a bit, when it was pass right off the rip. So that was interesting. And I'm really curious to see how he's planning on attacking Iowa. I also am really interested in number 7. Can we continue to see Trey and Quinn run the ball as well as they have previously against this Iowa defense? If they can, then it really bodes well as we continue to move through this schedule and the games get tougher and tougher, because these guys are pretty tough against the run. And if this running game doesn't miss a beat or even just takes a slight step back, it's going to be fantastic. If it looks rough running the ball, If the offensive line doesn't look as good, and if the running game, if Quinn and Trey aren't popping off 6 or 7 yard runs consistently like we've seen, um, it might be cause for concern, but that brings me to my final point. Here's what I think the game's going to end up looking like. The Buckeyes are going to be able to run the ball well. They're going to be able to pass the ball even easier, and they're going to score somewhere in the 30s. We'll call it 35. The Hawkeyes are not going to be able to run the ball as well as they hope. They're going to score a couple explosive runs. They're going to score somewhere around 10 points, and it's going to be about a 35-10 game. That's how I think it should play out. That's how I think it will play out. But what I want to remind myself is I've been watching the Iowa Hawkeyes play for 35 years, and sometimes they just muck things up because they're so fundamentally sound. They don't hurt themselves. They don't get penalties called on them. And teams like that, like them, like Kansas State, they just have a tendency to play above how good they are and make you look not as good as you are. And if this ends up being a close game and the Buckeyes win, this is a survive and advance mentality for me, because we're going to break this performance down 10 ways to Sunday as we head into the Oregon game next week. And I want to make sure to remind myself that just because things might not go perfect against Iowa doesn't mean that's how it's going to project out further. All it means is that is sometimes how it goes against Iowa. Now, if the Buckeyes look really sloppy, like they're beating themselves, that's a different story. But if Iowa finds a way to muck it up and we end up with a pretty close game in the end, or even close through 3 quarters, I just want to remind myself and everybody else that sometimes, man, that's just Iowa, and it just means nothing moving forward. They're just that type of team. So that's what I got for the game. To review, what I'm looking for: limit explosive runs, limit yards after contact, continued offensive line dominance, a fast start. How is Chip going to attack the defense? Can the rushing attack keep the torrid pace they're on? A couple more, actually. JJ, targets over 6. That's my magic number for JJ. The first couple of games, we saw that in the first half. Will JJ continue to get those kind of targets? Number 7, Jelani Thurman's snaps got cut by 50% last week. I'm hoping that's not something we're going to see moving forward, and I hope that was just a one-off. Maybe he had a rough week of practice. I don't know. Those snaps all went to G, whose snaps went up to 34. And previously, it was about 20 for Will Kazmarek, 20 for G, 20 for Jelani. So, does Jelani get his snaps back? I think he does. And not only that, I think that we're going to see at least one lengthy catch from Jelani this week. That's just a prediction I got, as well as Brandon Inniss being involved a little bit in the passing game, which we haven't seen much. So BI and Jelani with a couple of nice catches. I don't know why, but that's on my mind. And that's what I got for the Iowa game. Love to hear what you guys got for it. Now, let's move on to our slate of games for the rest of the weekend. And at glance, this is not an amazing slate of games. And we start off with Friday night. We've got Michigan State traveling to Oregon. The line for that, 23.5, which is the same line as Ohio State, Michigan State last week. Now, Ohio State had to travel. Michigan State gets them at home and gets them beat up from the Buckeyes the week before on a short week. Oregon should be a bigger favorite than that. That says something. Now, the Ducks may just beat them by 40. And if they do, they're going to talk a lot of smack to us, but we know the truth. And we took our foot off the gas. We could have really pounded him into submission in the 4th. Anyway, Jonathan Smith, Michigan State's head coach, coached at Oregon State, so definitely some experience against Oregon. Does it matter in this matchup? I don't think so. I'd like to see a closer game than I think we're going to see, but I don't think we will. So we're going to go with Oregon covering that 23.5 in this game. The second big game on Friday night, we've got Syracuse playing UNLV. UNLV ranked, and UNLV was good last year as well. So this isn't just a flash in the pan one year. They've got something building there. The game is going to be in Las Vegas, and we'll see what the Orangemen can do. UNLV is a 6.5-point favorite. I'm going to go with Syracuse. I think they get the win outright. Why? Because go Fighting McCords. That's why. So we've got Oregon and Syracuse in the Friday night games, heading into the 1:00 slate in Saturday. And guys, we just might come on and do a live and talk about the Buckeyes game that starts at 3:30, because the only game that is really of any interest, and I can find interest in a lot of different games, is Missouri at Texas A&M. Missouri, the 9th ranked team in the country. Texas A&M, the 25th ranked team in the country, because of course they are. They're in the SEC. Texas A&M, a 2.5-point favorite over the 9th ranked team in the country. Now, Missouri this year, very close game, 7-point game with Boston College at home. And then Vanderbilt took them to overtime at home. I'm just waiting for these guys to lose, which is a real shame for them, because the schedule is set up so easy for them to just steamroll their way into the playoffs. I don't think they will. I really don't. I think they're going to end up dropping a couple of games, and I think that this is going to be the first. So I'm taking Texas A&M minus 8.5 from College Station. I'm sorry, minus 2.5 from College Station to upset Mizzou. Other games in this time slot that really don't grab much interest at all. SMU at Louisville would probably be the second most interesting game. Louisville, the 22nd ranked team in the country. SMU been playing good in their first year in the ACC, and Louisville minus 6.5. I'm going to go with SMU to get in that number. So SMU plus 6.5 from Louisville. Other games in the time slot, we got Purdue at Wisconsin. It doesn't interest me a lick. Pitt at North Carolina might be one that some might be interested in. Pitt, a 2.5-point favorite, so it might be a tight game. Yeah. Tulane at UAB. Is that interesting to you? I mean, that's what we're looking at here. It's just a bad slate. Wake Forest, NC State. Yeah, we might have to come on live and just talk about football, because it's just a horrible slate. So then we move to 3:30. The headliner game in the time slot, of course, Iowa at Ohio State. The line is now Ohio State minus 18.5. Started out at 23.5. So some big movement on Iowa, which is interesting. Ohio State and Iowa. Iowa's just got a way of mucking things up, and this game could be a 35-point blowout or a 10-point win by the Buckeyes. Definitely not something I would bet on if I didn't have to pick it for the show. I don't usually bet on the Buckeyes anyway, but just so unpredictable with a team like Iowa. That said, I think the Buckeyes cover this 18.5, and we're going to put it here for our picks. And we were 10-6 last week. Let's see how we do this week. Another interesting game in the time slot. You've got Auburn going to Georgia. Now, Auburn has sucked this year record-wise, but they have played much better than the record shows. They've just turned the ball over a ton. Now, should we expect that to be any better at Georgia? Absolutely not. But what if they don't turn the ball over a ton? And what if Georgia's totally beat up, man? They just played a ball game. Like, that ball game was probably one, man. I mean, they got to be tore up. So the line, and I'm not saying Auburn's going to have a chance to win this game, but the line is Georgia minus 22. And I'm going to have to go with Auburn and take those points. So Auburn plus 22 against Georgia from Sanford Stadium. The next game, and this is the second most interesting to me in that time slot, South Carolina hosts Ole Miss. Ole Miss has dropped to number 12 in the AP poll. They're a 9-point favorite at South Kakalaki. They just lost to Kentucky at home, Ole Miss did. And South Carolina whooped Kentucky. Absolutely took them to the cleaners. I am definitely going South Carolina plus 9. Now, a lot of times we think when we see a team like this with a coach who's got some name brand recognition like Lane Kiffin, that, they just lost. They're going to be fired up. They're going to come in to win. And sometimes that works. Sometimes we just see that negative momentum keep rolling. And I think this is a case where we might see that, because Lane Kiffin, I just don't think he's all everyone cracks him up to be as a head coach. Excellent play caller. Now, Indiana Northwestern, not a game I'm going to watch, but Indiana, number 23 in the country, only a 14-point favorite against Northwestern. If it was Indiana minus 24, I'd still bet Indiana. So definitely give me Indiana minus 14. And the last interesting game in the time slot, which I think is pretty interesting, we've got Rutgers and Nebraska. Rutgers still undefeated. They're going to Nebraska. Nebraska, a 6.5-point favorite. Nebraska's just got that one loss against Illinois. And obviously, they've played pretty well this year. Rutgers, despite their record, they've been outplayed in two of those games, but found a way to win. But you know what? That's what Rutgers does. They're well coached, much like Iowa. Shiano's guys do it right, man. They're well coached. They do things well. And even in games where they're not playing their best, they can find a way to make it close, muddy the waters, or eke out wins. And that's what they've done so far. Nebraska, much more talented, in my opinion. I think they've got some really good running backs. I like Rayola as a quarterback. They've got some burner receivers. They could potentially blow Rutgers out, but I think Rutgers finds a way to muddy it up. And I think Rutgers gets in that 6.5. I hate that it's not 7, but I'm going to go Rutgers plus 6.5. And again, that game, if it was not on, if that game was in the noon slot, I would probably watch the whole thing. Because it's across from the Bucks, I probably won't see much of it. Maybe catch the speed version on Sunday when you guys are watching the NFL. And then, of course, we've got Clemson at Florida State, which, boy, when we did our top 25 list before the season, I should go back and see where this one ranked, but I believe it was in the top 10. And I had it in the top 10 with the logic that even though it's not an incredibly exciting game to me, we need to remember that somebody's going to win the ACC, and that guy's going to be in the playoffs as the third or fourth seed. So we still need to pay attention to the ACC, even though it's boring. And of course, the annual Clemson Florida State matchup would be one of the big ones we're going to pay attention to. So it's gone from in one of the top 10 games of the year in the Juckonbucks top 25 games list of the year to number 5 on my slate, 3:30 on a random Saturday in October. Like, wow. Unbelievable. That said, Clemson minus 14.5. Absolutely give me Clemson. Clemson is cooking with gas, coming around. Florida State is absolutely destroyed, falling apart, and in shambles. It's people talk about Mike Norvell's job now. Like, that's crazy to me. This is a guy in the offseason people were ranking, and I'm talking like educated people, people that write about college football for a living, national pundits, Mike Norvell as a top 5 head coach in the country. And in 5 games, you went from that to should Mike Norvell be back next year at Florida State? Now, anybody who's saying that is moronic. Like, that's way too far. But he has some things to change for sure. Their class this year, they're looking at maybe a top 20 class right now, and they're hemorrhaging players. They just lost one of their receivers, bailed out on him that was committed. So, you know, the portal thing backfired in his face, and I like to see it. I really do, because I cannot stand teams that are just relying on the portal for entire rosters. And they were looking at the portal for their whole defensive line. There's like a bunch of portal guys last year that really worked out. They get a bunch this year. It doesn't work out. And you need that as a cautionary tale. So I like it. Good for them. I also think that Dabo is going to feel a bit vindicated, as he has obviously been the most anti-portal guy. Mike Norvell, one of the most pro-portal guys. And you get to see these two teams match up. And Dabo is going to be definitely pounding his chest secretly, if not publicly, like that's what you get. You know what I mean? He's going to totally think that, see, I was right, you were wrong type of deal, because that's what a smug kind of son of a bitch he is. All right, on to the 7:30 slate. We've got Tennessee, number 4 at Arkansas. And the Hogs have athletes. They've got bigs. They can find a way to keep it close. They're getting 13.5 at home. I'm going to go with the Hogs. Give me Arkansas. They are going to run the ball a lot with that excellent quarterback they got. He's a hell of an athlete. And I think that they're going to keep it close with Nico's boys. Then we've got Michigan heading out to Washington. In this game, guys, Michigan number 10, Washington unranked. Washington lost 2 games already. The favorite, plus 1.5. This is a tough spot for Michigan. It's a far travel. It's a tough place to play. And every part of me wants to pick Washington, but I just don't see it happening. I'm going to have to go Michigan plus 1.5. I think as an Ohio State fan, there is part of me that is scarred, and I think a lot of them feel the same way. I just think that there is part of me that always overvalues Michigan's team as a result of my formative years being John Cooper era. And I think a lot of people my age or older kind of have this, but that's the era I grew up in. And even when it looked like we were going to totally destroy them, we would find a way to lose. And there is something about that has just put this level of respect for that program. Even when logically to me, it doesn't make any sense. There's just this little bit of fear. Well, maybe they will. Maybe they will. I can't get over it with this game. And I just feel like they're going to win, unfortunately. Other games in this time slot that are slightly interesting. Not a ton. The headliner game, 10:30 p.m. Number 8, Miami, heading to Cal. Cal, who has played well. Miami minus 10. Bro, Miami coming off that loss. Give me Miami minus 24. Miami's going to blow Cal out. I know Cal is much improved, but they do not have the horses to run with this Miami squad. So that's what I got, guys. Again, appreciate y'all so much. Let me know what you think about the picks. Let me know what you think about the Bucks. And I will talk to you tomorrow for the post-game show. Talk to you later. Juckonbucks out.